Okay, well, welcome everyone to today's webinar on applying for federal funding 101. We've had a very positive response to this webinar topic, so we hope that you find this information helpful and informative. My name is Krista Guzman, and I'm a planner here at the North Central Texas Council of Governments in the Environment and Development Department. And I'll be moderating our webinar today, and I'll be assisted by my colleagues Carolyn Horner and Brianne Johnson in keeping an eye on the chat and with any questions that may come up. We have a very full agenda today with speakers from the State Energy Conservation Office, many different staff here at the North Central Texas Council of Governments, and then also a speaker from the Department of Energy. So we are going to go ahead and get into our presentation. Quick background is that we are doing this webinar today as part of our work with the State Energy Conservation Office and to help advance efforts related to energy management, energy efficiency, and renewable energy throughout the North Central Texas region and the state. We recognize that applying to federal funding can be a very time-consuming and daunting task for many, particularly if you don't have a very large staff or you wear a lot of different hats in your role. So we've designed today's webinar to stay focused on more of the higher level ins and outs of applying for federal funding, so it can be a helpful resource to as broad of an audience as possible. And we felt that given the influx of funding that's flowing out to communities over the next several years through the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, also known as the IIJA, or the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, also called the bill, that this was a very timely webinar to have. So we hope that you walk away from today with a greater understanding of the timing and the process associated with applying to federal funding and confidence to seek out applying for upcoming opportunities. To save time for the meat of our presentations and training today, we won't be reading off each speaker's bio. However, they will be in this presentation deck for your review later. So Eddie, I'm going to hand it over to you to give us an introduction on today's webinar.
Thank you, Krista. Hi, I'm Eddie Trevino. I'm the director of the State Energy Conservation Office in Austin, Texas. This is an exciting opportunity. We, along with many other Council of Governments and other entities, have been looking forward to the distribution of funding through the bipartisan infrastructure law. And we, like everybody else, recognize that while some of this funding may be formula-based in the case of the state energy offices around the country, other formula, or the bulk of formula, is competitive in nature. So we are in the same boat you are, in the sense that there are many funding opportunities that we have to compete just like you do. And we recognize that preparing these proposals and preparing your information for submission and review by the Department of Energy is sometimes a daunting task. One thing you cannot do is start too late in the process. One thing that we also recognize is that the North Central Texas Council of Governments has been quite successful when they pursue competitive opportunities. So they're the best teachers for all of us. So thank you for coming, and thank you for attending, and thank you for North Central Texas COG for sharing this information with everybody else. I appreciate it.
All right, thank you, Eddie, for your very kind words. We appreciate it. All right, so we have just a few polling questions throughout the presentation today. Don't worry, the questions aren't that difficult, but we have found that asking a few polling questions in a virtual environment helps us all to feel a little more connected and engaged with each other. Our first polling question is, what size of a local government or agency do you represent? So it looks like our live slide is a little hung up here. Sometimes it's a little slow, but it looks like we have a pretty good mix of individuals with us from across all different size local governments. Okay, so we'll move on to our next polling question. And that is, have you ever previously applied for federal funding? The answers are about half that it know that you have not, and 40% have, and about 10% of you have, but it's been just a little while. And it looks like one of our polling questions didn't get activated, but that's okay. We will just move on. Okay, so I'm going to turn things over to our first speaker, who is DJ Hale, and she is here to talk about the STAM registration and obtaining your unique entity ID, or the UEI. DJ, the presentation is yours.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. I have been seeing some of the questions in the chat, and hopefully I'll be able to help with some of that. If you have not experienced SAM.gov before, it's very slow. It can be kind of frustrating, and it's basically a course in endurance. Can you persevere enough to get your SAM registration updated, changed, or in the first place received? What you're going to do is you're going to go, if you've never been there before, you're going to go to sam.gov. I will tell you, as a little bit of a caveat, getting a registration in SAM is absolutely free. But if you Google sam.gov, the first two entities that come up are entities that will do your registration for you, but they're also going to charge you about $1,000. At least it was $1,000 about 7 years ago, and I'm sure inflation has hit them as well. So be sure you're going to the true SAM account. You'll see Uncle Sam's hat and sam.gov. That means you're on the right place. From this is the beginning starting screen. You have a taskbar. You can do some searches. If you are unsure if you have a SAM account, before you actually register for a new one, I would do just a very simple search. You can, from the taskbar at the top, hit search, enter your entity's name, and it will bring up entities if you were there. That's just kind of a quick way to start. If not, if you do not have one, or if you have one, there are two things you do. You're going to go to that secondary box in the middle of the screen, has the green get started button there. You're going to press that green button if you do not have a SAM account. If you have a SAM account that has expired or you're needing to update it, you would go down to your renew your entity. But that's where you're going to get started is by doing that. SAM has recently moved into basically being a two-part process. The first step is you've got to get your UEI. UEI is the unique entity ID number. In April, the government moved over from using the Dun & Bradstreet DUNS numbers to this special unique entity ID number that they are assigning. It is a 12-digit alphanumeric code that they assign. So that takes, once you enter that information, and the information for this is very, very simple. You're going to need your entity's legal name. You're going to need a physical street address. They do not use P.O. box numbers, and I did notice some of the issues are the P.O. box numbers. And then they may ask a few other questions. You're going to submit that information to them if you've never done this before, and it's going to take between 7 and 14 days for them to get a UEI back to you. From that, when you get that UEI number back, then you're going into phase 2, which is you're going to ask for a SAM registration. It truly is a two-part. We have had some entities recently, because I work with risk with the transportation department at COG, who got their UEI and then they kind of stopped. And so they didn't really have a registration with SAM, which kind of put us having to wait up to 6 to 12 weeks in some cases for the registration to go through. So it is a very long process. It takes a while when you make a change. It takes a while to get your initials. So start soon and just be persistent. Could we go to the next slide, please? All right, what I wanted to do are just go through some things. Once you have your UEI, you're going to have to do your SAM registration. These are things that you're going to need. You're going to need core data. I went ahead and used COGS registration. You're going to see some of the core data that's listed there. You're going to need your physical address. Physical address is what they key off of, but they also give you room for a mailing address. You're going to need business information. You're going to need entity type, some financial information. Points of contact, very important. We'll circle back to that just in a few minutes. You also, based on the type of registration you're requiring, may have to fill in some assertions and some representations and certifications. There are, and I guess this is as good a time as any to say, there are FAQs that help with a lot of this information. So just keep in mind that there are some FAQs, there are some guides that can help you as you're doing this, especially if you're new to this whole thing. Could we go to the next slide? All right, this is the core data. This is more specific in that core data. You're going to need your UEI, which has just been assigned to you, your name and address, and they do give you room for your mailing address. You're going to need your commercial governmental entity code if you have one, a CAGE code. You're going to do, you're going to need your Department of Defense activity address code if you have one. You will need your taxpayer identification number, your TIN. It's either going to be your employer ID number or it's going to be your social security number. The name associated with this registration must appear in either the W-2 or the W-9. They do go to the IRS and confirm all this information. That's part of their validation. So that's very important to have. Excuse me, you're going to have some general information. They're going to ask along the way. And then you're also going to have your electronic transfer information, which is basically your bank routing number, your account number, your bank phone number, fax number. Just those are the more specific. Now, it will take probably slightly more than an hour to go through it and fill out all this information. So just know that it takes time. Again, persistence pays off. Could we go to the next slide, please? Okay, now these are just some special notes for you when you're applying for this. As someone who has to check SAM registration as part of a risk assessment and along those lines, let me say that when you're looking, there's a question that says SAM search authorization. Be sure and check yes, because what that's going to do is that gives SAM the authorization to publish non-sensitive information about your entity. What that's going to do is if you apply to funding for COG and I go in to check your COG registration, it's going to let me see that you do have an active registration. It's going to let me see when it expires, and it's also going to let me see if there are any exclusions. That's part of the department. I have to check those pieces of information. If you've marked that no, it will show me absolutely nothing because I'm not a federal entity. So then you and I will be talking a whole lot on the phone trying to get something that shows me that piece of information. So remember, it is non-sensitive information. It's always good to check yes. It just basically speeds up the process going forward. Now, the points of contact. This is very important. You need to make sure that the points of contact are good contacts. Your administrative or point of information contact is the person who is going. I did see in one of the chats someone who said they're getting lots of emails kind of yelling at them. That is the person that they contact saying, hey, we need more information, or hey, there's an issue, or hey, it's time for your registration to be updated. So we want to make sure those are always in there. They're very good. If you do not validate it, they will mark your SAM registration as expired. Not good if you're trying to get money really quick, because again, this can be a very long process. So just be sure that when you can have multiple points of contact, but there is one main contact. There's one main contact person they want to be able to get to if they have questions. So just be sure. And with today's great resignation going on, people are changing out a whole lot. Just make sure that if that contact person is leaving, you get that updated as quickly as you can, probably prior to their leaving, because you'll need access to their email accounts. Everything is generated off of the email account of that point of contact person. Could we go to the next slide? Okay, I just wanted to give you a slide. This is just a general slide of what we verify. This is important. This is what I see if you mark it, yes, it's viewable to the public. It's just going to show me your unique identifier. It's going to show me CAGE code. It's going to show me that you're active. That wonderful green dot is wonderful to see. It's going to tell me when it expires. It's going to basically, then I skip down to the blue. I'm looking for active exclusions. This is your report card, people. It's always good to have none there, or inactive exclusions, things that have expired. So those are the things that we check very briefly. Those are the requirements of checking debarment. We're just looking to make sure those things are good and in place. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, tools. One of the big things about SAM, and one of the things they've done really, really well since they've moved to this unique identifier, is they've really upgraded their FAQs. So it's very, very important to look at those FAQs. They're going to help you on staffing changes like we were just talking about. If somebody leaves, you want to update that as quickly as possible. Your legal business entity name, if something happens and the name changes. If your mailing address, your legal business address, and it's not mailing address, I'm sorry, it's actually your physical street address. If that changes, that needs to be updated. Or they're just generic FAQs, and they're like, hey, we had one a long time ago, it's expired, what do I do now? Because if you had a SAM registration, even if it was inactive and expired, when they assigned these unique identifiers, these UEIs, everybody got one. So you potentially could take off 14 days of that long wait when applying for a SAM number. So those are kind of just some generic things to look at and to know. Let's move on to the next slide. Okay. If you need help, this is what we did. On the basic sam.gov page in the toolbar, there's the help button. Always good to know. It's underlined in green because I went to the help. These are your help services that are available. If you look at the help topic trends, those are all the things that have been asked recently. The validation, I think it says validate, sorry, I don't have my glasses on, validate my entity. If you go to there and you click on that and you go down, it's going to give you specific information of how you validate if you're making any changes. And one of those changes would be your address. So when you're making those changes, the other thing to keep in mind is anytime you update anything, you will have to go through every response you gave and review them. You have to go through the entire process. You can't just change your address and stop there. You've got to go through every response you gave. So it will take about an hour to get through everything. It's also a good time just to refresh and make sure that everything still is correct for you. But that would be also one of those things you'd find under validate my entity. If you look over at just the number one, SAM, there's a search. You can actually do a search in there for specific topics. You can explore and see what's the most popular things that are being talked about, which are usually the issues everyone is experiencing at the same time. But you can also go to the Federal Service Desk. Number two is going to the Federal Service Desk. If you click on that tab, it is going to take you to the Federal Service Desk. And the Federal Service Desk has lots of good things for you. One of the best things I've found there is a guide. It is called the Entity Registration Walkthrough All Awards. This is a step-by-step guide to applying to SAM, all the way from getting your unique identifier all the way through doing the registration. So, and it truly does. It shows screens. It's like 51 pages. I would certainly recommend, if you're going to do any kind of change, that you read through that guide first. You can download it, you can print it, whatever your options are for you. That's just a great thing to do. But also at the Federal Service Desk, you can actually contact them directly. They're the ones that are going to help you if you have any issues that are not being resolved. You can email them through a direct contact from the Federal Service Desk, or you can also call them. They'll give you a number. And my experience with calling them has been actually really great. They're very good to get back with me. They're very good to answer questions. They're very good with following up, saying, okay, is that really what you needed? Do you need anything else? So I will say their customer service skills have been really good as far as my interaction with them have been. So, but this is where you can find things. FAQs are wonderful. When you start typing in, they actually have like a question mark, and you can start typing in and it will fill out. So you get to see. I actually spent about 30 minutes here the other day just looking to see what all that they did have available. Can we go to the next screen? Okay, these are just some last thoughts. One of my advice to everybody is just to read through all your FAQs, pull down that guide, look at that before you start. It's going to help you gather information. The unique identifier, has replaced the D&B DUNS number. D&B DUNS numbers are no longer listed, so you will need to know a unique identifier for moving forward. The good news is it also goes through several, that same UEI is going to go through several governmental applications. So you kind of, it's like a one-shot log on kind of thing. Your STAM registration must be updated every 365 days to stay active. And you have to be active to receive federal funds. So put it on your calendar. I'm sure that they will plague you with emails as well. The process takes many weeks to complete. I would like to say it's just now because they just changed over to the UEI, but quite honestly, folks, SAM has been a slow process since I started working on this a lot 7 years ago. So unfortunately, it just takes time and persistence. If you have any questions, I would contact the Federal Service Desk. Sometimes it's best just to go to the source and say, hey, this is what's going on, see what they can come back. They do have a wide range of FAQs available. You can always start there. And then I went ahead and listed the name of that entity registration for all awards guide. I would certainly recommend that. The other thing to keep in mind is with the change over to the UEI, SAM has opened up where you sign up and you create an account with SAM. If you create an account with SAM, which is basically giving them some credentialing information, your email address, your name, company you work for, it's a two-prong recognition. So you've got to give them your cell phone number so they can contact you and make sure it's you when you sign on. Having that registration account means that you can see more things when you do a search. So it gives you a little bit more access. Those credentials also flow over all the governmental agencies too. So it does give you kind of a way to get around through some of the other databases that might be really important as you go through. And I think that is everything. As far as I'm going to go ahead and respond to the registrations and changing addresses. Just keep in mind it is persistent. Keep in mind if you just went in and changed your address and didn't go through every other piece of information, it won't keep it. I don't understand why in the changeover from 21 to 22 they changed your address out. Could be something crazy going on, but just be persistent. And I know it's maddening. I know it's upsetting. We have had some people that had past registrations that literally created a new one. You can have as many as you need. So, and that's it for me.
All right, thank you so much, DJ. So our next speaker is going to be Emily Beckham, who is going to cover an overview of grants.gov and the registration process. All right, Emily, it's yours.
Perfect, thank you. So before I hop into some of the details about the registration process, I did want to highlight just a little bit about grants.gov. So if you're not familiar with grants.gov, it is a centralized and standard place for grants. It provides a very secure and reliable source in terms of getting information from grant-making agencies for federal grants, and really helps to kind of streamline the interaction with the federal government. So it provides really that centralized place where all of the notices, the information, the updates are posted in one kind of place, and then it houses all of the information associated with those grants in the same place, and then provides you kind of a workspace in terms of being able to collaborate with inside of your agency for development of those those grant applications. Next slide, please. So like DJ kind of alluded to, there is kind of a one-stop login place for several federal grant making agencies. It's called login.gov. So actually when you sign up for sam.gov, you are actually signing up for a login.gov registration. And so really this kind of workflow just goes through the entire registration process for grants.gov. So I'll kind of cover that quickly and then get into each of the individual steps to get registered. So the first recommendation is to sign up for that sam.gov account, both to get your entity registered, but also then for any unique individual that you would want to have access to that grants.gov portal. So to start with that login.gov registration is going to really streamline the grants.gov process. So then go and register in grants.gov and set up a separate password for grants.gov. And then complete that connection between sam.gov and grants.gov so that then your registration is complete and you're able to search and apply for grants. So I have some slides on this that will kind of cover that recommendation in a little bit more detail for you guys. So next slide, please. So again, when you log in to sam.gov, you'll see that this notice says, hey, we're using login.gov to help facilitate the sign-in process. So you get that same message actually when you log into grants.gov too. So they're both using the same platform, which login.gov is a secure sign-on service, which is used to access several grant-making agencies' information. And then, so like I said, I recommend to start basically setting up your account with the login.gov username and password first. And then I just want to note that your sam.gov administrator, so whoever administers the data in your sam.gov account becomes the point of contact who manages your user access levels in grants.gov. So that person is known in grants.gov as the eBiz point of contact. So I'll speak a little bit more about the user levels later in the presentation, but I did want to make sure I specifically highlighted that the sam.gov administrator, so the person that's listed as the point of contact for your sam.gov account, is the person that administers the grants.gov user level access. Next slide, please. All right, so now to get into the details specifically of grants.gov in terms of registration, I have several just screenshots that will get us really through kind of the step-by-step of that registration process. So this is really the landing page of the grants.gov website. So you can see that register link. It's kind of small at the top right-hand section of that website, kind of that red arrow is pointing to that. So once you click on that link, it's going to take you to this next screenshot, which will give you some information about how to sign up and register, and then what kind of data you're going to need. So when you go through the registration process, you'll have the option to sign up for newsletters and emails, which will help you stay up to date on funding opportunities that are going to be published. It will also give you the option of how to set up your account, whether you'll be an individual applicant, so not applying connected to your specific agency, or whether you'll be an organization applicant, which will allow you to register under your entity by connecting to that UEI. So you'll see that there's like that red Get Registered Now button. And then we've also provided the link here for you to be able to get registered. So once you click on that Get Registered Now button, it will take you to that registration screen. So you'll be entering some information for the individual that you'd like to get registered. So first name, last name, email, a primary phone number, and then a username and password. So just as a note here, the username and password that you set up here cannot be the same username and password that you use to set up your login.gov account And it looks like maybe the presentation disappeared.
Yeah, one moment, I'll get it back online.
No problem. Okay. So once you've entered all of the information and selected your username and password, then you would be able to continue on to the next screen. So I went ahead and did a registration for someone on my team. And that's going to give you then something that looks like this. You will select to send yourself or whomever that person is this temporary code that will email them a temporary code to basically validate that presentation. I'm sorry, I was reading that chat. That will validate that email address, and then you'll get that code and enter it into, I guess, like a dialog box that will pop up. So once you have validated that email address, then it's going to give you something that looks like this. So this will actually be where then you select how you want to register that entity. So you have the option to continue without setting up a profile for that user, or you have the option to select that that they're an individual applicant or an organizational applicant. So again, the organizational applicant is what is selected here. So you would be adding the UEI number for your organization, which will allow you to enter a profile name. So I always set up COG staff with a profile name of our entity name. So the North Central Texas Council of Governments. And then since that's connected to your entity, you're entering a job title. And so I just enter the job title for that individual. If you're adding them as an individual, then you would just select that box and proceed. So once you've entered the information, then you would hit save, and then it will take you to the login screen. So as you can see, when it takes you to the login screen, to log in, it is asking you to click on this login.gov box. So since the very first step of the process that we recommended was to set up a login.gov login, you'll be able to click on this login.gov box, which will then take you to the login.gov screen to get registered. So the first time I walked through this, it was actually with someone else who did not have a login.gov account. And so you can actually see, if you're looking kind of closely in that screenshot, it is giving them like a red, this is not the correct email address, error at the top. So what you would be using to log in on that screen for the login.gov is the login.gov email and password that you set up. If by chance you did not start with setting up a login.gov account, you will then have to go through at this point in the process to set up a separate login for login.gov. And again, remember that that password cannot be the same as your grants.gov. If by chance you happen to set it up as the same as your grants.gov username and password, it will require you to then go and reset the password for your grants.gov account. So let's assume that login.gov is set up and you're able to then enter your login.gov username and password. Once you have signed in through that login, it will then take you to a grants.gov screen in which it will say link to your grants.gov account. And I know that the text is a little bit small, but under that dark blue text in the very small black text, it says your login.gov account is not yet connected to your grants.gov account. And so the username and password that it's now asking for you to enter on this screen is the original grants.gov username and password that you set up. So you would enter into that username and password, that grants.gov username and password, and then hit submit. And then it will take you into the into grants.gov. And I will flag that kind of linking between login.gov and grants.gov is only a one-time process. So once those two are connected, you do not have to connect those two. Again, they're connected through your email. So once you have done that once, you should be good. So then you'll enter that and then proceed, and you should be then logged in to grants.gov. So that completes the registration for a new user. In the event that you have an individual who originally selected on this registration screen, not that they were an organizational applicant, but an individual applicant, I'll kind of walk you through how to update their account to get them connected to the organizational profile. Next slide. So once they are logged into their account, at the top right hand of the screen, there'll be an option where the red arrow is. It says My Account. And then there'll be some tabs that will say Manage Profile. And then under Manage Profile, there'll be an option to then select New Profile. So you'll enter New Profile, and then under that, you'll be able to enter the UEI, the profile name, and their job title. And once all of that information is then entered, you'd be able to save that, and it will email the e-business point of contact to get them signed up and approved. So from there, what is the next slide? Okay, so then once that individual is registered, this is what their account would look like. So you'd be able to see their name, their UEI that's connected, the type of organization, so whether they're an organization, applicant, job title, and then their role. So, and then what their privileges are and if they want to edit those. That should complete really the process for changing an individual to the organizational account. So I think those are really the options in terms of getting somebody registered and with the appropriate user access. I will cover under a later part of the presentation the workspace roles and how to kind of choose and or make sure those are assigned appropriately. But I'll just lastly kind of cover that as a reminder. The individual who is set up in the stam.gov account and administers that is the eBiz point of contact, and that eBiz point of contact is the person who assigns the user roles. So when new people are getting added, they would be the person that would have to go in and approve all of those logins to have appropriate access in grants.gov. So again, I'll cover that again when we get to kind of user roles for workspaces. But I think that is all for the registration.
Okay, thank you so much, Emily. So next we have Savannah Nance, who is going to walk through how to navigate and search for grants using grants.gov. And then she's also going to discuss opportunity statuses and how to determine what that means and how to what to look for in a funding opportunity. So Savannah, the presentation is yours.
Thank you, Krista. Everyone can hear me okay? Krista, can you give me a thumbs up? Okay, I see some thumbs up, so we're good. So hopefully at this point, you guys understand the importance of getting registered and getting set up in SAM.gov early. We do recommend that be the first step before you start looking into grant opportunities. But even if you can't get registered or you can't make an account yet, there is a lot of content on grants.gov for everyone to go look at and familiarize yourself with. So we're going to talk through some of that. Like Krista said, we're going to talk about how you can learn about grants.gov and the grants.gov Learning Center, how to determine your eligibility, how to search for and filter for federal financial assistance opportunities, what to look for these funding opportunities, and then we're going to let Emily talk about how to actually apply for the opportunities, and then how you can use Workspace, which is a program on grants.gov that lets you submit your applications online. Next slide. So to get to the grants.gov Learning Center, just going to have a ton of information on it. You're just going to click on the second tab to the right of the home screen on grants.gov. I did put the grants.gov link in the chat earlier, so if anyone would like to go there, you can. Next slide. This is going to be the grants.gov Learning Center. On the left-hand side, you're going to see the grant topic areas. So you can read about Grant 101s for those of you that said you have not applied for grants before. Grant eligibility, you can read about grant-making agencies, reporting for grants, and then there will also be links to any live events or webinars going on for these grants. In the center of the screen, it's a little small, but there is links to the grants.gov community blog. So the community blog is a great resource to read about Grants 101 and what is a grant. It's very small, but they do have a blog series on that. And then additionally, there is a federal grant writing tips blog series that's great. Also in the Learning Center is the link to the grants.gov YouTube channel, which has short educational videos, and it can also help you troubleshoot a few things on your grants.gov account. We also wanted to flag that on the grants.gov Learning Center, there is a list of grant-making agencies. And if you go to the Learning Center and go to the agency page, you will be able to see a list of all the agencies. And then if you click on the agency that you're interested in, you can read about some common grants or funding opportunities that they have provided, and then additional information on that agency. Next slide. Okay, so I am going to take over and do a live demo of grants.gov, but we did want to flag that we have screenshots of the things that I'm going to cover in the slide deck, and then this is also being recorded, as we told some of y'all. So if you miss something, don't worry, you will hopefully be able to go review it afterwards. So I'm going to share my screen. So on grants.gov, there's going to be two ways to search. One is going to be, you can navigate to this blue Search Grants tab. And then the other way you can search is by going up to this text field on the top right of the screen. We did want to flag that there's a little drop-down menu right here. It defaults to grant opportunities. So if you search in here, it's going to take you to a list of grant opportunities. You can switch this to site content. So if you're looking for something more specific that's not a grant opportunity, you may need to switch to site content and search that way. If you go to the Search Grants tab, you can see that there are over 2,000 funding opportunities currently posted. So there's quite a bit, which is why we wanted to talk to you about how to search for grant opportunities that are relevant to your organization. And these you can filter. On the top left, you can see these basic search criteria. So if you know the opportunity number for a specific grant that you're interested in, you can search for that specific grant. Or if you know the CFDA, which is the federal coding number that federal agencies use, you could search for that. But if you just want to start looking around to see what's out there, if you're not familiar with federal grants and maybe you just want to see if there's anything out there you could look at, you can use these filtering opportunities over on the left-hand side. So the different ways you can filter is by opportunity status, funding instrument type, eligibility, category, and then agency. Opportunity status is going to be the availability of a funding opportunity. So it's going to default to having forecasted and posted checked. Forecasted means the opportunity is not yet formally available and is pending budgetary and discretionary spending approvals. So for our example, I'm actually going to uncheck this, but forecasted is a great thing to look at because it means there's a future opportunity that maybe your agency might be interested in. So now we have it as posted. Posted means the grant is currently available. Closed and archived, you can also look at if you're curious, but generally they aren't as helpful. Or funding instrument type. Grants are actually not the only thing on grants.gov. There's lots of funding or assistance opportunities. Grants and cooperatives are very similar, where it's providing financial assistance to an agency. But for most cooperative agreements, it's going to have what's defined as substantial involvement by the federal agency. So they're going to be working more closely with you, more of a side-by-side process. Procurement contracts are going to be a goods and service contract that is either provided by the federal government or negotiated by the federal government. And then other will just vary. You'll have to check that and review it. It varies by grant. Eligibility is generally pretty self-explanatory. It is the eligibility for an entity to apply for this opportunity. So I think most of us are city and county governments, so I'm going to check that. And then I'm also going to check grant, so we can just look at the grants that are available. And at this point, we are now down to about 700 results. So we're getting a little closer to being able to narrow down our search criteria. Next, we're going to look at category. Category does not refer to the type of agency, or it refers to the topic of interest to the grant. So this agriculture is not the Department of Agriculture, it's just what the grant refers to. So I'm going to click energy. And now we only have 2 grants that are open. So one thing we did want to point out is that at the top of the screen, you do see the filters you have applied. So energy grants that are available to city and county governments are checked right now. And if you are logged in to grants.gov, which I am, you are able to save the search that you've created. So this is beneficial because you can reference back to this search in the future. And then as well as when you save a search, you will receive email notifications when either one of these grants are updated or when another grant is posted that's has the same criteria. So we'll just save it really quick to show an example. You guys can see that the criteria that I checked earlier are still checked. And now it is saved and it's in my saved searches. So if I go to my account and I'm logged in the future, I could delete a saved search. I could edit it to change what I have applied, or I can hit view results and it takes me back to the search grants page with the same filters applied. So this could be very helpful if maybe you're a one-person show and you just need to save these searches so you can refer back to them later. So next I'm going to quickly talk through just a couple things to notice whenever you're looking at these grants. So for this example, this is an energy grant from the Department of Transportation, and it's about natural gas infrastructure safety. When you click on a grant opportunity, going to automatically open to the Synopsis tab. And it'll have the funding opportunity number, the title. And then the first thing we wanted to point out was the opportunity category. So this refers to the type of grant that this is. So generally, if it is a discretionary grant, that means it is a competitive grant. There are also other types of grants, such as mandatory, formula, or block grants that you might have heard of. And typically those are specifically written to go to specific entities, so you may or may not be eligible. You also want to look at the expected number of awards, because that could affect how competitive the grant is. If there's any cost sharing or matching requirements, so does your entity have to put forth any funds, or could you get 100% of a project paid for? The posted, updated, and closing dates for the application. This is a currently open application or funding opportunity. The award ceiling, the award floor, and then the total program funding. The award floor is going to be the minimum that you have to ask for to apply for this grant. The award ceiling is the maximum you can apply for. So just make sure whenever you are looking for grants that your project or what you're asking for is within the scope of the grant. If you scroll down, there's additional eligibility information, and then there's contact information if you have questions about the grant. If we go up, you can also see version history, so if you need to look through and see the changes that have been made. But one thing that we did want to point out was the related documents tab, where this is going to have the pretty long RFGAs for the program. So if you go in here and you download these and read through them, this is where all of that nitty-gritty detail on the grant will be. So definitely make sure you review all of these documents before applying. The package tab, if you go here, this is going to have the forms you have to fill out to apply. So if you look at the preview, you could see these are the forms you have to fill out. So hopefully at this point you are registered, you have read through a grant opportunity, and you're ready to apply. So I'm actually going to hand it back over to DJ to talk about how you can apply and use Workspace. I'm sorry, to Emily, not DJ.
That's okay. Thank you. So, next slide, please. I think those are just for the slide deck, so we might be a few more forward. All right, so from the opportunity, you would click on that red apply button. If that by chance is not highlighted in terms of being open, then it does mean that there is something that is not yet completed with your registration. So if that is grayed out on your screen when you go to apply, then you would probably need to reach out to your e-business point of contact to make sure that appropriate user access has been set up for you to be able to set up a workspace, or if you only have user access to be able to participate in a workspace. Next slide. All right, so once you hit that apply button, you'll be able to set up your workspace so that this screen will look like this. So you'll be required to enter your application filing name. So think of this just like a project title that you can enter. Once you enter it on this screen, you will be able to change that once your workspace is set up. So next slide. So I have just put in here for the slide deck kind of what the workspace looks like once we get set up, but I'm going to go through a couple slides and then switch over and kind of demo and talk through the workspace. But I did want to talk a little bit about getting the workspace user set up and some user roles before we do that. Next slide. So grants.gov has several different user roles for the workspace, and for their just access to their platform in general. So the first set of roles are what they call core level roles. And so those are different roles within of grants.gov. And then the second level of roles are workspace level roles. So the core level roles are really you have your e-business point of contact. Again, that's the administrator, the person that assigns all of these different levels of access for any individual that is set up within your organization. And so kind of options for setup. Individuals can be set up to have what's considered an expanded authorized official representative or a standard authorized official. And so the either expanded AOR or the standard AOR, both of those individuals will have the ability to submit grant applications on behalf of your agency. So at a minimum, one person within your organization needs to have one of those roles. The core role for people who are submitting or updating workspaces is going to be this workspace manager. And then they do have options for what's considered a custom role, and then not assigning people a role, but they wouldn't be able to update really and edit workspaces. So within then the workspace role, you do need to assign somebody as an AOR, again, that authorizes that actual grant application to be submitted. You need one person who sets up the workspace. They usually become the workspace owner. And then you have a workspace participant. You could have more than one workspace participant. So just kind of another visual to represent what that looks like. I put together a flow chart on the next slide. So you could have multiple grants that are set up and have different things assigned depending on what you're working on. So let's say you have two grants, each of them has an AOR. One of them you have two people working on, so you have one that has a workspace manager and one with just a participant. And then one you just have one person working on. So you have your AOR and then you have the workspace manager. So a little bit about what each of these different types of roles can do. So the AOR, they do have the ability to upload documents. They have the authorization to submit that application. The manager, they have the ability to edit and upload documents. If a form is locked in that application, they do have the ability to override any forms that are locked. They have the ability to add other workspace participants and then release that application once it's complete to the AOR for submittal. And then the workspace participants, they only have the ability to edit and upload documents inside of that workspace. Next slide. All right, so from here, I'm going to kind of move over to demo in the actual grants.gov portal. So I'm already logged in to grants.gov. So I am already logged in and I have the grant application or that funding opportunity that we had found that we were interested in applying for. So I'm going to just kind of go through the workspace from left to right in terms of navigating. So you'll see that these items here are linked. So this is the funding opportunity number, and it will actually give you a link to the grant opportunity synopsis. So you can click on that and it is going to take you back to that very first page where that apply button is. So to navigate back, you can actually click that back button. It's going to take you right back to your workspace. That next package, PKG, that's actually going to take you to the same place, but specifically to that tab that's called package. So the first one took you to this first tab, the synopsis. That second link takes you to the package where you could preview all of the documents in that package. So then application filing name, when I set up this workspace, I just created a title, interesting application title here. Let's say, oh, that's not really what we want. You can't edit it. We'll just change it to really interesting application title and save. And then that's updated. And you can update that however many times that you want. You'll see that this assigns a workspace ID for you that actually kind of becomes like a tracking number. Same thing to highlight here, opening and closing date. If that closing date changes, you'll notice that that's modified right here in the workspace. We'll come back to this in just a minute. So this right here says that the AOR, our organization has an AOR, but this has it doesn't identify that any AOR has been assigned to this specific workspace. So we'll come back. It is identifying me currently as a workspace owner because I set up the workspace. Since my login.gov and my grants.gov account are linked and linked to SAM, it is automatically pulling in our agency's SAM expiration date. Sometimes when you log in, if you haven't logged in recently, this may say click to update or refresh SAM registration date. It is okay to click on that to refresh, and then that date should appear for you. In terms of the tabs, the forms are all of the required forms that have to be filled out before this grant application can be submitted. You have a view application, which I will come back to once we've done a little bit of like entry here on the forms. Attachments, again, it's just going to go through what attachments you have uploaded and show those here. So participants, I'll come back to, but activities, this is literally going to be a log of any activity that has occurred in this module. So at the very end, when you have submitted this, you'll see there is a timestamp. So you would be able to see the timestamp for when it is submitted. And then same thing, just like Savannah highlighted, there is information here about who the contact information is in the details tab. So I'll go back to the participants tab. So the participants tab is where you're going to add information for workspace participants if you would like to add those. So if you're adding somebody within your organization who already has a grants.gov account, you would add from workspace. You would add from workspace organization. So this second tab, and then it's going to pull up a list of anybody in your organization that you could add. So I would like to participate and collaborate with Savannah. And then I need to also add an AOR. So that is going to be Mr. Eastland, our executive director. And so I'm going to save that. Now, both of those individuals are going to get an email that they have been added to this workspace. And you can see here, it says, are they authorized to submit? Yes. And now you can see that the AOR status has been updated to say workspace has an AOR. So we would be able now, if we were finished, to submit this application. You'll also be able to see that when I added Savannah, there's an option to make owner. Actually, I could make Mr. Eastland the owner as well. If I wanted to delegate my me as the workspace manager to Savannah. So since I want to show you guys the function of unlocking and locking forms, I'm not going to do that because otherwise I wouldn't be able to do that. So now we have a collaborator and an AOR, so we can kind of move to taking a look at some of the functions of the forms. So I went ahead and completed the SF 424 before as if I was completing it for COG. And you can see when you go in, some of the information is filled out in terms of the gray parts you don't have to fill in. They actually come because they are connected to the application that you have applied for. You can see there's required fields that you would not be able to move forward without completing. So once you've entered that, it will, and you're complete, it will ask you, do you want to unlock or lock this form? Let's say that you do not want to unlock the form. It will show you that the form is locked because it is complete. So maybe you don't want anybody else to edit that form. So one of the other required forms here is a SF 424A, so the budget form for non-construction projects. So in your options here, you have the ability to download that form, and then, which to download it, you do have to then lock that form, and then open that file, and it is going to give you then an editable PDF that you can enter information on. And then once you're finished, you would check for errors, you would save that, and then you would upload that document back here. The other option that you have is to reuse a form if the information, maybe you utilize this project to apply for another grant a few months back, and you're basically using the same project again to apply for a different opportunity, then you may be able to reuse a form from a previous grant application. So this is just giving you a caution due to some version differences, not all data may be copied, so please double check for completeness. So what this is going to do is take you back to search for previous grant applications that potentially you can use. So for example's sake, I'm just going to go and use the latest SF 424A from one of COG's submitted grant applications, and then enter and select that data. So I just selected that and hit OK, and then you can go back in, and it's for a different funding opportunity, but you can see all of that data is entered in to the standard form for 24A based on what we entered. So from there, you would be able to save, check for any errors, close if you wanted to, and then unlock the form. So then let's say that all of these other pieces were complete. You could then go and view your application. So the View Application tab allows you to be able to request a view of the full application that you will be submitting so that you can maybe have that if you need it for electronic files. It will archive in the system, and I'll show you where you can find that. But maybe you need to submit that to somebody who's not in the system. Maybe you guys want to keep it elsewhere outside of the system. So you would download that, and again, that's going to generate a PDF of everything that is in the system so that you can save that. So that is including the SF424. If you had entered the mandatory attachments, those would generate for you, as well as the budget that you entered, that's going to generate in the PDF for you to be able to save. So once all of that is entered, then I think, Krista, I'm ready to go back to the presentation. All right, so then once all of that is entered, you would get a screen that looks like this in terms of having the option, and it's grayed out because I pulled this as an example from a submitted grant application, but you would have the option next to the left of the delete tab to complete and notify the AOR. So once it's ready to go, that option would show up, complete and notify AOR. So you would first check the application for any errors. So this would be errors in terms of maybe the forms were updated since you had passed the forms. You may need to update some of those, or maybe there's other errors. Then you can release it to the AOR. So that workspace manager would be able to then complete and notify the AOR that it's ready for submission. Then the AOR would go in and sign and submit that application. So as you are working through all of those items, when all of your forms passed, you'll see that the status bar changes colors at each of the steps. So in this particular example that's displayed on the screen, this application was originally due on June the 10th. And then, so we submitted it on June the 9th, and the closing date has been extended to June the 17th. And so as of right now, the agency has not retrieved this particular application for evaluation. And so we would again be able to also check the status of that under the activity tab. So upon submittal, you'd also get a confirmation email as well as a confirmation page. And then once that agency retrieves that application, you get a confirmation email as well. All right, next slide. And then just a little bit about where do you find a workspace once you have submitted that, or you're looking for kind of where those archived applications are. So when you go into grants.gov, you'll see the fourth tab over from home is applicants, but you'll also see, and you can see there's a manage workspace options under applicants, but also on the left hand, I guess, menu bar, there is a manage workspace options under grant applications, kind of where that red arrow is pointing to. So you would click on manage workspaces, and then it's going to pop up like a search and filter option for you to kind of enter criteria. So when I hit search, it defaults to some parameters in terms of new, in progress, ready for submission or submitted, and then like kind of a set date range. And so it's going to pull up usually by default ones that you're already working on or were recently submitted, but you can easily change the date in that range and or the parameters to pull up different ones that you're looking for. And specifically, if you want ones that are archived, those are going to be ones that are older, much older. So I think on the next screen, I went through a process to look for grant applications that COG had submitted back to January 1, 2021. And in the, original screenshot, there were probably, I don't know, 15 or 20 that showed up, but it was really quite small. So I kind of truncated this picture. And that was looking at any of the workspaces that were in basically all of the statuses between that time frame. All right, next slide. All right, I think that is it for the workspace item.
Okay, thank you so much, Emily. So our next speaker is Amy Hodges, and she is going to be covering some tips that we have for applicants.
Thanks, Krista. Amy Hodges, I'm staff with the North Central Texas Council of Governments. We're running up upon 4 o'clock, so I'm going to be fairly brief. But I did want to highlight some things from an applicant point of view. Oops, we're losing there it's back. Okay, so I will also go to the share my screen and show you grants.gov, some things I want to show you there about applicant training, the videos and the online user guide, and the applicant frequently asked questions. We really cannot stress enough how thoroughly you need to read these grant-related documents. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. One thing that I've done, okay, somebody shared their screen. That's okay. I'm going to keep talking. I'm going to share my screen anyway and go to grants.gov. One strategy is to download the forms, and share the content burden, as far as filling everything out with other staff, maybe even other organizations. And then that content can be copied into forms on the workspace. So just an option on working outside of the forms that are in Workspace. And then also I'm going to touch on attachments, and we'll see that highlighted on grants.gov. So I'm going to share my screen right now. Okay, are we looking at grants.gov?
Yep, we can see it.
Okay, beautiful. Okay, just really quickly, I just wanted to highlight, if you scroll down on this homepage, there's some quick links here. You can quickly go to search, the user guide, YouTube videos, et cetera, just by scrolling down a little bit and clicking. And then I wanted to point out, here's a quick way to get to the Grants Learning Center, which Savannah was showing you. And then this block, grant writing tips. I highly recommend looking at that. Okay, applicant training. So I'm going to click on applicants. I'm just hovering right now. You can see all the options there. I'm going to go ahead and click and go to that web page. One thing right here, applicant training. So over here in the Learning Center, that was, real high level. It's all about grants.gov and learning about grants. Here on this applicant training, let's go there. Okay, right off the bat, you have this nice little menu here on the left. And then here in the center, here's where you're going to have some video series for training. They always have a featured video. This one happens to be on the workspace. It's a very popular topic. And here you have a video series that's kind of intro to grants.gov. These are short, they're only 2 to 3 minutes. And then further down, another category for organization applicants. And these are, that's down below is where they're quick. But anyway, none of these are more than like 3 minutes. I've clicked around on them and explored them. So continue your learning and come here and listen to these videos. Here are quick clicks video series for workspace users. These are short. Some of these are even less than a minute. Okay, so I just want to show you that real quick. And then the user guide I can get to it from over here, or I can hover here and get to it, or I can get to it from the home page. This is a very good user guide. I'm going to click on the online user guide, instructions on how to get started. There's a couple of different views over here. If you can see my cursor here on the left, they've already got some topics that you can click on, so you can explore this. Another thing is kind of a glossary in alphabetical order, another way to find topics. This third option, you can filter by terms. Like, let's say I want to learn more about Workspace. I start typing, I just type the word work, and I have, these options. I can click on them. If you click on a specific one over here from this A to Z one, then it gives you the content here. And a lot of them have more links. You can click to even more information. And then you can always just search, which is similar to the other one I just showed you. Okay, another thing I wanted to show you, FAQs. So these are answers to frequently asked questions that applicants ask. Here's the kind of the contents. These are anchors. It'll pop you down below to that topic. But here they've already talked about attachments, so I just wanted to highlight attachments here. What type of attachments may be added? Are there restrictions on file names? So very important. You're going to have your main form that you're going to fill out when you're applying for a grant, and then you're going to have attachments, supporting documents. So these attachments become very important. It's not unusual to have 10 attachments. So read carefully the requirements for attachments in your grant-related documents. There may be a naming convention. Some of them say they won't necessarily even review an attachment unless that exact attachment name is referenced in the text of your application form. So be very, very careful. And the grant-related documents will tell you these requirements, but I'm just kind of warning you to watch out for that kind of thing. Some of them have a limit as far as what types of file types they will take as well. The other thing, okay, we're at 401. I just wanted to quickly show you an example of a grant. So I did a search. I found this FTA Lono. It's closed now, but my point of coming here is to show you this particular funding agency has even more information. They have a link to their website. And if you were to click on that, this would come up, and then you scroll down, and sure enough, they've had a webinar, a recording of that webinar. There's all kinds of things for me to read as an applicant over and above the federal registry notification that's uploaded on grants.gov. So again, read everything very thoroughly, read as much as you can, get as much training as you can. Sorry, we're over time now. That's all I had.
Okay, thank you, Amy, for sharing your tips with us. We appreciate that. And I'm going to just breeze through this. We have a couple of resources on the North Central Texas Council of Governments and also SECO that in your own time that you can check out. And if you would like to learn a little bit more about our work with energy management and efficiency, please feel free to reach out to myself in the Environment and Development Department or to Lori Clark in the Transportation Department. We work jointly with them on this project. And you can also visit our website and access additional information and resources related to this project there at that link on the screen. And so with that, our webinar today has concluded.